All right, diving right in today.
Jumping right into it.
We're tackling something that's really at the forefront, I think, for a lot of companies,
Yeah.
especially as AI becomes more and more integrated into just about every facet of business.
Absolutely.
How you govern that AI
Yeah.
really has a significant impact on your environmental, social, and governance performance.
Yeah.
So your ESG.
Uh-huh.
And I think this is particularly relevant. It's not just for tech
Yeah.
companies anymore. This
Yeah.
is for any business owner,
Mm-hmm.
any board member,
Okay.
anyone who is providing AI services.
That's right. And you've provided a really interesting set of materials for us to dig into here. We've got everything from,
Yeah.
a lot of the foundational ideas behind AI governance
Yeah.
to some real world regulations that are starting to pop up
Yeah.
around the world. And we'll really be looking at how this all ties into a company's ESG responsibilities.
Right.
And we'll be looking at that through the lens of some key ISO standards and guidelines from bodies like ASEAN.
Okay, so I think to set the stage for this deep dive,
Yeah.
the main thing we really want to try to tease out here is how
Right.
inadequate AI governance can actually negatively affect
Yeah.
a company's ESG. And we'll look at, we'll try to pull out some of the really key insights from these documents, particularly focusing on, how they relate to some of those ISO standards and, this growing web of regulations that are starting to...
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things that is really becoming clear
Yeah,
is this really tight link between AI and ESG.
right,
It's no longer enough to think about them as two separate things.
right.
So just to lay the groundwork a bit,
Yeah.
what do we even mean by AI governance? It's probably more than just this idea of being responsible with AI.
Right, yeah, and I think, from what I've gathered, looking at these materials,
Yeah.
it seems that AI governance is really about kind of proactively establishing policies and frameworks
Yeah.
to manage the risks that are associated with AI. So think about it as like your internal rule book
Yeah.
for how AI is used in your company or in your services. And it's really designed to minimize things like unintended biases
Right.
and legal headaches and security gaps and
That's right.
privacy violations.
A concise way to put it.
Yeah.
And Informatica and their materials really emphasize that,
Yeah.
this governance isn't just about one stage of the AI game.
Right.
It needs to be integrated through the entire life cycle of an AI system, from how it's designed and developed
Right.
to how it's deployed and used on a day-to-day basis.
Right. So this is not a
Right.
set it and forget it. This is an active,
Active, continuous.
continuous process.
Yeah.
And I think really the aim here, the ultimate aim,
Yeah.
is to ensure accountability,
Uh-huh.
transparency,
Yeah.
and fairness in how data and AI are actually used.
That's right.
And this isn't just about dodging bullets
Yeah.
or avoiding, negative
Mm.
press or anything like that. It's really also about creating an environment where innovation can actually thrive,
Right.
but in a way that is both ethical
Uh-huh.
and responsible.
Exactly.
Okay, so now let's try to connect this directly to ESG.
Yeah.
And, for those of you who are deeply familiar, you know that
Right.
this is the framework that investors and stakeholders are increasingly using
Yeah.
to evaluate companies beyond their financial performance.
Right.
So it's about their impact on the environment,
Mm-hmm.
how they treat people and society,
Yeah.
and the quality of their leadership and their internal controls.
Right.
Okay, so how exactly does poor AI governance
Yeah.
start to erode a company's environmental standing?
Right. Right.
So the E in ESG, because when you think of AI, you might not immediately
Yeah.
picture smokestacks or
Yeah.
pollution or anything like that.
Right. It doesn't have like a
Uh,
physical manifestation in the same way. But the ISO DTR 2026 report really
Yeah.
highlights some of the impacts that we might not immediately think of. And one of the big ones is just
Yeah.
the sheer energy demand of AI infrastructure,
Uh-huh.
especially data centers, these massive data centers
Right.
that power so much of our digital world.
Yeah.
Those data centers often rely on traditional power sources,
Yeah.
which contribute a lot to carbon emissions.
So training these sophisticated AI models,
Yeah.
keeping them running isn't as clean as
Yeah, not necessarily.
it might seem.
No, it's a big consideration.
Right. And the pressure is mounting too. And the ISO report also points out the significant water consumption
That's right.
of these data centers,
Huge amounts of water.
particularly in regions facing water scarcity.
Exactly. And
Right.
that's an increasing concern.
Right. So keeping those vast servers cool requires
Yeah.
substantial amounts of water, and that can put a real strain
Yeah, absolutely.
on local ecosystems.
Yeah.
This water aspect is not something I had fully
It's a big one, yeah.
appreciated. So are there other environmental dominoes that can
Yeah.
fall due to...
Well, e-waste is a big one
I-
that the ISO report highlights.
Okay.
You know, the fact that AI technology is advancing so fast
Uh-huh.
means that there's a lot of disposal of electronic devices.
Right.
And e-waste often contains some pretty nasty stuff
Right.
that can be harmful to the environment. And, you know, poor AI governance might contribute to this by not using hardware efficiently or upgrading systems
Right.
too early.
Right. So sort of prematurely getting rid of things.
Yeah, and the ISO standard really emphasizes that.
Okay.
We need to look at this from a life cycle perspective.
Yeah.
So looking at the environmental impact from the moment we extract
Okay.
the raw materials all the way through to disposal.
To get a full picture.
You need to get a full picture.
So that makes a lot of sense. Now let's turn to the S, the social aspects
Okay.
of ESG. How can a lack of robust AI governance damage a company's
Yeah.
social responsibility?
Well, this is where issues like bias in AI training data become really important.
Okay.
Both the ASEAN Guide and the source on combating algorithmic bias
Yeah.
really highlight this.
Uh-huh.
If the data used to teach AI systems reflects existing inequalities in society
Uh-huh.
or isn't sufficiently diverse,
Right.
the AI can perpetuate and even amplify those
Yeah.
biases,
Agreed.
leading to unfair outcomes.
So, for example, like an AI that's used in recruitment,
Yes.
that's trained on historical data, where certain groups were underrepresented in leadership positions,
Right.
might unintentionally keep those groups from
Yes,
advancing,
right.
even though that's not the
Right.
goal that was originally put in.
Right. The data itself is biased,
Right.
and that's hard to overcome.
And Informatica also points out that a lack of transparency in how AI systems work can really erode public trust.
Absolutely.
So if users don't understand how an AI is making decisions
Yeah.
that affect them, they're far less likely to accept.
Right. It feels like a black box.
Right. If it feels like a black box,
Yeah.
it's hard to have faith
Yeah.
in those outcomes.
Makes sense.
What about data privacy? I mean, this feels like a
Yeah.
huge
Absolutely. It's a huge concern.
social concern in the age of AI.
Right. Both the source on combating algorithmic bias
Yeah.
and the national guidelines on AI governance and ethics
Uh-huh.
point this out.
Oh.
A lot of AI systems rely on collecting and analyzing
Yeah.
huge amounts of data. And often that includes very sensitive personal information.
Right.
And without a good governance framework in place,
Yeah.
that data is vulnerable to breaches,
Right.
misuse, and all sorts of intrusive profiling,
Yeah.
which directly infringes on people's rights.
Right. So a company with lax AI governance could inadvertently
Yeah.
or even deliberately, I guess, mishandle user data.
Yeah. Leading to public outcry and regulatory investigations.
Absolutely. A lot of risk there.
A lot of risk. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's move to the final pillar.
Okay.
G for governance.
Yeah.
How does the absence of clear AI governance impact a company's overall
Right.
corporate governance?
Well, it seems pretty straightforward if you don't have well-defined policies.
Right.
You're much more likely to fall out of compliance with regulations.
Right, yeah.
Which are popping up all over the world.
Right.
The materials from Informatica and White and Case both point to this rapidly evolving legal landscape.
And it is remarkable how fast
It's really fast.
these regulations are emerging.
Yeah, we're seeing proactive legislative efforts in countries like South Korea, Spain, Switzerland, Taiwan. It's all over the place. And China's AI measures, which came into effect in August of 2023, offer a really concrete example.
Okay.
They outline specific compliance obligations.
For providers of generative AI, covering everything from the lawful use of training data to ensuring content responsibility. And there's upcoming mandatory labeling of AI-generated content in China.
Wow.
That's slated for September 2025.
So businesses that aren't really thinking about AI governance now could easily find themselves on the wrong
Absolutely.
side of the law.
Very easily.
In multiple jurisdictions.
Yeah, that's a huge risk.
Huge risk. Okay, so the ASEAN Guide highlights the importance of
Yeah.
establishing internal governance structures.
Right, like an AI ethics advisory board.
Right, with
Clear responsibilities, yeah?
clearly defined responsibilities,
Yeah.
reporting lines.
That's right.
And they also emphasize the need for these risk impact assessments
That's a big word.
before deploying any AI systems.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's also a central point in ISO Aik FDIS 42005.
Yeah, it's all about thinking ahead
Right.
and identifying those risks.
Right. So without these things, companies are really operating with a lot of
A lot of risks.
unnecessary risks.
It's avoidable risk, yeah.
It's avoidable risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so that paints, I think, a pretty clear picture of the potential pitfalls for companies that are not prioritizing AI governance.
Yeah.
But let's look at the other side of that coin.
Okay.
What's the business case for implementing strong AI governance,
Right.
particularly as it relates to ESG?
Yeah.
How does this actually benefit
Yeah.
the bottom line and the company value?
Well, Informatica points out that robust AI governance directly leads to more reliable AI outputs.
Okay.
By ensuring transparency, accountability,
Right.
and quality control.
Yeah.
You're much more likely to get accurate and dependable results.
Right. And more reliable AI, I would think, would lead to better
That's the idea.
informed business decisions.
That's the idea.
Right.
Better decisions, better outcomes.
Better outcomes, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else?
Well, strong AI governance can really reduce compliance risks.
Uh-huh.
If you proactively align your systems with legal and regulatory requirements,
Yeah.
you can avoid fines and penalties.
So it's not just about
Yeah.
avoiding negative press. It's also about
It's about protecting your bottom line.
protecting your bottom line
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah, big time.
Okay, so what other benefits?
Well, effective AI governance can also prevent
Yeah.
that erosion of trust among users,
Uh-huh.
and it can reduce operational failures.
Okay.
And even overcome resistance from employees and stakeholders.
Yeah.
You know, if your AI systems are seen as trustworthy and ethical,
Uh-huh.
they're much more likely to be embraced.
Right, they're much more likely to be used effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
So connecting this back to ESG,
Yeah.
we saw in the Wikipedia overview that companies with strong ESG performance,
Yeah.
which increasingly includes responsible AI,
Uh-huh.
are being viewed as more attractive and less risky investments.
Right.
So this potentially leads to higher profitability,
Yeah, absolutely.
greater investor confidence.
Investors are really paying attention to this.
So it's not just a cost of doing business responsibly.
Yeah.
This can actually be a driver of value.
It can be a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now
Yeah.
you mentioned the relevance of these ISO standards earlier.
Yeah.
For our listeners who want to take some concrete steps,
Right.
which ISO standards should they really be looking at
Yeah.
to navigate this regulatory landscape and ensure sound AI governance?
Okay, well, ISO IES DTR 2020-26,
Yeah.
as we've already talked about, focuses specifically on the environmental sustainability aspects of AI.
Okay.
It offers detailed guidance on managing energy consumption,
Yeah.
impact of data centers,
Uh-huh.
carbon emissions, water usage, e-waste.
Right. So this is for any company who's serious about
Yeah.
minimizing their
Innocent.
environmental impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. What about the broader spectrum of...
Okay, well, that's where ISO S 42005 comes in.
Okay.
This standard provides a framework for doing
Yeah.
AI system impact assessments.
Okay.
It helps organizations figure out the scope of the assessment, consider all the different factors,
Right.
understand stakeholder expectations, and really identify
Yeah.
all the foreseeable impacts.
So comprehensive.
It's comprehensive, yeah.
Risk assessment.
And it stresses the importance of
Yeah.
documenting things like data provenance.
Okay.
You know, where is the data coming from?
Mhm.
Detailing how the model was developed,
Yeah.
thinking about the specific environment where the AI is going to be deployed. It's very thorough.
It sounds like a fundamental step for responsible AI implementation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there standards that address the management of the systems themselves?
Yeah, that's ISO IC FDIS 42006.
Okay.
This outlines the requirements for putting in place an AI management system,
Got it.
or AIMS,
All right.
and that's based on the framework of ISO IEC 42001. Okay.
So it's about setting up a formal system specifically tailored to AI.
Right, so similar to what
Similar to what you might have for
organizations might have for quality management.
Exactly.
Or environmental management.
Yeah, very similar.
Okay.
And it even references ISO IEC 5338,
okay.
which focuses on those AI system lifecycle processes. So you can really dig into the details there.
All right. And then for a broader understanding of how AI is being applied across industries.
There's ISO IEC DTR 24030.
Okay.
That offers a collection of different use cases and provides insights into things like predictability and transparency.
Okay.
It's important to note, though, that these use cases are informational.
Right.
They don't represent endorsements from ISO.
Okay.
But they are interesting to look at.
Okay.
So there are examples there of AI being used in smart energy grids and medical diagnostics and even quality control in manufacturing. Right. So it sounds like there's a really robust set of ISO standards that businesses and AI service providers should be familiar with.
Yeah. It's a good starting point.
Yeah. You also mentioned guidance coming from regional bodies like ASEAN and from national governments.
Right. The Asian Guide on AI Governance and Ethics provides a really valuable regional perspective. And it really stresses the importance of those internal AI ethics advisory boards conducting risk impact assessments and ensuring human oversight in decision-making processes.
So it's not just about, letting the machines run wild.
No.
Humans are still
in the loop.
In the loop.
Yeah.
Now, what about those national guidelines that you mentioned?
Well, the national guidelines on AI governance and ethics from Malaysia articulate some really key principles like fairness, reliability, privacy, inclusivity, transparency, accountability, and the pursuit of human benefit.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that they really emphasize integrating these principles with national values and maintaining a human-centric approach throughout the whole AI lifecycle.
So it's not just about ticking boxes.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about really embedding ethical considerations into how we think about AI.
Right. Okay. So bringing this all back for our listeners, what are the key takeaways for business owners and board members regarding this impact of AI governance on ESG performance?
I think it's crucial to recognize that AI governance is not just a technical issue.
Right.
It's a fundamental business risk that impacts your ESG standing and your long-term value.
Right.
So you need to be asking those tough questions.
Right, about
the data you're using,
the
transparency of your decision-making, and the environmental footprint
of your
AI infrastructure.
Yeah, and then for those who are providing AI services.
There's a growing demand for AI solutions that are built the right way, with strong governance, transparency, and ethical and sustainable practices.
Yeah.
Adhering to those standards, like ISO IE 42001 can be a real differentiator.
Right.
It builds trust with clients and shows that you're committed to doing things the right way.
It sounds like the consumers and the providers of AI have a shared responsibility here.
Absolutely.
To ensure its responsible and sustainable adoption.
They need to work together,
Yeah. So to sum up our discussion today, it seems clear that inadequate AI governance poses some pretty big risks.
Big risks,
to a company's ESG performance.
Across all three pillars.
That's all three pillars, right?
Environmental impact, social responsibility, and corporate governance.
Yeah, and addressing these risks by adhering to regulations.
Yeah.
And adopting standards like those from ISO. Isn't just about avoiding those negative consequences.
Right.
It's really about building trust. Ensuring reliability. And fostering sustainable and ethical integration of AI.
Which can lead to long-term value.
Which can lead to long-term
competitive advantage.
And competitive advantage. So here's a question for you to think about.
Okay.
As AI becomes even more integral to business operations, how will a proactive and robust approach to AI governance not only protect against those ESG risks, but also become a key differentiator?
A source of competitive advantage.
And a source of competitive advantage.
Yeah, that's the question.
So we encourage you to explore those ISO standards and emerging regulations and see which ones are relevant to you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been really insightful. Until next time.